Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the GCS Connect Leader Series. We've got Stuart Kirby today. He is from Innovation Hub and also Sparks. Nearly 15 years experience in training, teaching, and developing people in technology. And he works with GCS in their Innovation Hub to develop very interesting and innovative courses for rare skills such as RDK, DAB, and Matter. So it's really great to have him on board. I know him well, so it's good to understand how he trains, how he develops people, and being a leader of a training and development company as well. So hope you enjoy it. I'm sure you will. Thank you very much. Here's Stuart. While you sound as if you're in rainy Manchester,
Yeah,
you're actually in incredibly sunny Riyadh, I think, aren't you, in
indeed.
Saudi Arabia? So yeah,
Yes.
so obviously we'll talk a little bit about that and your journey there. Um, but yeah, I think that's interesting for people to kind of understand, like you kind of being out there, working out there. And obviously we've had quite a lot of kind of conversations about this, but there's quite a lot of conceptions, aren't there, of like what it's like. But you've
Yeah.
told me that it's a lovely place to live, very, very, very nice. And not saying that's not people's conceptions, but you have a very good life out there, I believe.
Yeah, I love it here. I
Yeah.
really, really do. And I think one of the tragedies is that you said this is an interesting thing about me. I think it's been my character trait for the last 5 years now. I think it's the most interesting thing about me, which is the really sad part. But yeah, it's really good out here. I think I'm into my 5th year now. I was in
Mm.
Jeddah on the coast for the first few years, and I moved to Riyadh around last year when there's a lot of momentum in the capital city in Saudi, especially around technology. So it was time to get into the mix really and get to the core of the place.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, we'll talk more about it and what that means
Yeah.
for you as a leader and that sort of thing. But first off, you're the technology director for a business called the Innovation Hub, which is one of
Yeah.
our sister companies, and you work very closely with myself and John to build that. And we'll talk more about the services there. But you also CTO of a training organization called Sparks,
Yes.
which again is within technology training. And I'm just always interested when we speak to leaders like yourself, is like how you got to here, like what your journey. I was interested as well, kind of at the perfect start, because obviously 5 years as a teacher, but 17 years in this industry, how did you develop into a leader of these training organizations? What is your path to that?
Usually will go back to people that I've been surrounded with, to be honest. I think that I grew up in North Manchester in a place called Harper Hay, and
Right.
there was a whole outrageous, I should add, a TV show about Harper Hay called People Like Us by BBC a few years ago, and it gives a sensationalized insight into what it's like. But growing up in North Manchester was amazing, but I was always very lucky, and I think that's one of the ways that I describe how I do what I do. And that luck is about the people that I was with. So when I was at school, I didn't like school all that much as I respected the teachers and on the whole, anyway. I didn't love being there. I didn't like, I have to do this and all of those kinds of things. But when it came to college, I was very, very lucky that I had a teacher there that I thought I could do what you do. I want to do what you do. He was teaching me Cisco networking and Cisco CCNA, Cisco CCNP. And he's
Right.
called, there was two of them actually, Maksud and Shafiq, and they were awesome. And one of the people that I grew up with has been extremely influential in my life is a chap called Martin. And he was one of my first managers, but bizarrely, we grew up on the same street together. With that, I kind of took the lessons that I'd learned from them and being generally positioned in the right place and just try and capitalize on everything that I'd ever done. So you mentioned at the beginning that I was a teacher. So I
Yeah.
was a teacher for around 5 years, loved it. And
What type of teacher were you? Secondary school or
FE, so
college?
sixth form.
All
So I
right.
used to
Okay.
teach
Yeah.
A level and national diplomas, and it was always computing.
Sure.
And
So
with
people have
Shafiq,
actually chosen that they actually want to do this, because all my daughter said she
yes,
went to sixth form is like it's better in sixth form because actually the people have chosen the courses they want to do and they're
yeah.
interested in it rather than God, I hate computing and GCSE type.
It makes a big difference. It makes a
Yeah.
big difference. And you can foster a nice environment with people that want to do it. And there's
Mm.
also an amazing challenge, to be honest, with people that don't want to do it and trying to inspire them to want to do it. And I think that's a superpower that teachers have. So when we operate in a space that, people do want to do it and they've chosen it, you get to really push some boundaries maybe with the context, so in technology or in science, maths, whatever the subject is. But when you're dealing with people that aren't sure that they want to do it, you're kind of pushing the boundaries on a personal level. So I think that in the business that we're both in, whether it be Innovation Hub, Sparks, GCS, those lessons still persist, no matter whether we're dealing with very experienced engineers that perhaps don't want to do the training because they think, oh, I've got this, why am I here? To the people that are just getting started out, surrounded by extremely experienced engineers, and they feel that they've got quite a long way to go to match that level, so they feel a little bit of fear. And so I see my job is with trainees and students is very similar to the people that we work with, which is empowering them to go and do the best that they can. And I think one thing that I've learned, typically anything that fails will generally be my fault, but anything that's successful is usually because of the people that we've got around. So it's like I can mess things up on my own, but I can't really be successful on my own. And so I think with the almost like the three-party thing that we're talking about with GCS, Innovation Hub and Sparks, the way that we work together is the secret sauce. It's the magic behind what we do.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I guess it's just interesting for people just to, who maybe don't know what Innovation Hub is, just to understand a little bit about what the Innovation Hub is, what type of services that you provide, and how that's being used like live in organizations at the moment.
Yeah, the Innovation Hub is probably the most ambitious thing that I've been involved with regards to scale and attitude, I think. So I've got quite a big history in technology and training, and we've done, we tried to get involved with some amazing things there and have been, but the Innovation Hub is essentially looking at developing from grassroots talent right through to the tip of the pyramid, very specialist engineers. And so what we do ultimately is train people in fairly rare skill areas and more general. We've got quite a wide portfolio, but one of the key things that we do is tackling the very rare skills shortage within the technology space. There's been a lot of noise about the skills gaps that exist in the technology sector. Usually at grassroots, there's not enough new developers. Whilst that's true, there's not enough app developers and web developers. There's definitely not enough embedded engineering developers. So the Innovation Hub is providing services trying to help businesses overcome that talent gap by ultimately producing the people that they need.
And that's what's interesting, I think. And with the Leader Series, I always try to kind of steer not too much into technology, just in case it switches people off. But if you think about open source and you think about that world of open source, and then you think about the barriers to entry of actually being a good embedded software engineer, right? And I think we'll talk about the barriers to entry a little bit more, but it's very hard to get into it. But then people are constantly inventing new technologies to do things better, right? So it's not like accountancy. You qualify as an accountant. I could be wrong here. You are an accountant, right? You're going to be an accountant. The basics of accountancy doesn't really change, right? But technology is constantly innovating and reinventing itself. And I know for a fact that the cool skills of 5 years ago, if you haven't refreshed your own skills and you haven't got it, and this is why there's such skills demand, and that's what you are plugging into, right? To try and that there's this little skill that if you put it on top of someone with this core skill, then they've got what you need, but you can't learn it. So I'm going to teach them. I think it's a really interesting part of the market to focus on.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that it's interesting with skills because skills will often age. They'll be one of the first things that might age, but knowledge doesn't necessarily age in quite the same way. So kind of like what you know and how you might approach a problem, those things potentially stay fairly consistent, but the application of that knowledge insofar as a skill goes, that can be extremely volatile, especially in our sector. So the Innovation Hub, especially the Innovation Hub, is ultimately about being that partner which you can access at any point. So being very accessible, and it shouldn't feel like training often, even today, feels like a big event. If you think about any organization that you work with, oh, we're on training this week, or there's going to be a big training event in 3 months' time, and it always feels like this very, very scheduled, big thing that needs lots of layers of approval, etc. And we're trying to strip away some of those barriers and make it much more accessible and serviceable. It shouldn't be a big thing. It should be the expected thing. So we need to make it easier to access.
And what drove you to take the jump from being a teacher to being a trainer or a technology trainer?
Yeah, That's a great question. And I just mentioned him, funnily enough, in the introduction. But a friend of mine called Martin, he is currently technical CTO, like executive CTO at a huge digital consultancy. But I knew him when he showed me Doom on his PC for the first time.
Doing.
Finally, just
Wow.
Doom. Yeah, exactly. And that's
Yeah.
been a recurring theme in my life, that game, right? And I
Yeah.
remember vividly when he showed it to me, and I was like, "Oh my God," and
Yeah.
it's a real life changer. That moment seeing Doom, and then throughout my time when I was teaching at the sixth form, Apple they announced the iPhone in 2007 and the App Store in 2008.
Yeah.
And I jumped on it as quickly as we could and put that into our curriculum. We were doing that. Martin was already at this digital agency, and because I was good friends with him, I was extremely fortunate to know him. He was like, "Would you like to kind of like do some work with us?" So alongside the teaching, I was doing some stuff with him, and then eventually decided we'd go and do that full time. It was kind of in that final year of being a teacher, I kind of had enough. Being a teacher is an extremely challenging, rewarding, all of these things, but it's a very timetabled life. You have a session, and you do what you have to do. And I think I needed just to take a break from it and go and do commercial stuff. I wanted to not just be the guy talking about it. I wanted to be building stuff. And so I was lucky. If I didn't have Martin around at that point, I may have stayed in teaching.
It goes back to the people that inspired
Yeah.
you, the people that have led you kind of along the way. And I think
Yeah.
all leaders, all people have that in their lives, don't they? And
I
that sort
hope
of thing.
so. Yeah, I hope
Now,
so.
when we talk about, recruitment, and we talk about the sales element of recruitment, we always go and say, like, if you've done field sales, like you've knocked on doors and actually borne the brunt of people shouting you in your face or whatever, or charity sales on the street or something like that, we always say, that's a good apprenticeship. So do you think that's the same for teaching into training, like corporate training? Is it like, if I've taught in a sixth form now, this is easy, this is like, is it just different?
It's something which I talk about a lot, funnily enough,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I remember, if we fast forward kind of like away from when I'd left teaching to go and work for the digital consultancy, and then went to work for a training company, kind of as employee number one and shareholder with a previous guest that you've had on here, Andy
Andy
Lord.
Lord, yeah, fantastic, good, great guy.
So to this day, I spoke to him a couple of days ago. We're still really close. And when we started that training business, it had to be technically amazing. The technology that we taught had to be perfect. So that's something that private boot camps generally did. Focus on the technology, have people that can code, teach other people how to code, which is great. We did it a little differently, and we focused on the quality of the teaching first. So, and it was a bumpy road, kind of like initially, because we're talking about trying to have teachers teach people to become developers in 3 months that are commercially viable. So the teachers had to go on a big journey, but they knew how people learn. There's a lot of focus often on what people learn and what they need to know, but not how is the best way to give them that. So the sixth form experience that I've got powered Code Nation in a huge way, like in a really, really big way. And it does with Sparks and Innovation Hub as well, because ultimately knowledge is the key driver, which will mean you can keep easily acquiring skills if your foundations are really strong.
Strong.
Whilst it's different, and training engineers, experienced engineers, is a different experience than training someone with A-level computer science, the mechanism for it probably isn't all that different. And if you've got a teaching style and an approach, which I usually back something which we call immersive, which is just match it to the job that they're going to do. So if you're training to be a developer, train to be a developer in a way that feels like the role. If you're a senior engineer right now, how will you apply that in the role? We'll have the training function like that as well, with good education principles. So don't talk for too long, for example. Talk for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, give them a quick activity, and keep what we call chunking the lesson. So chunking the sessions up into digestible chunks. And then the crucial difference, I think, between commercial training and kind of like classical education is simply the bit after. So the aftercare that you get, because you've probably heard of it, the so-called training gap, where people get put on training. And because training is this usually big scheduled event and everyone gets super excited about it because it's relatively rare for companies to put people on the right training, they might do a training course and then not apply those skills for weeks or months afterwards, and then a
Yeah,
lot
you
of
need. Yeah, it's why when you put a new piece of software in or something like that, isn't it? And everyone has these, right, okay, well, we're going to train you on how to do it.
Mhm.
And then like you sell sizzle sausage or whatever, but these kind of, then everyone's like, yeah, okay, great, we'll all use it. And then you go back to exactly what they were doing before and don't use the piece of
Exactly
software,
that.
right? You've got to use
Yeah.
it, you've got to put it into context, and you've got to kind of implement it and work with it. You obviously mentioned Code Nation there, and this is obviously something that you're quite connected in this world. But obviously, Code Nation and Sparks and I think Innovation Hub are things where you're looking to create different paths into technology, right? You know,
Yeah.
different. You know, we've talked a lot about this in the format of the Leader Series, but also with our clients, how to increase the amount of people that work in technology. You know, why is this such an important subject for you? Why have you kind of dedicated yourself to this?
But I think it's because ultimately technology is for everyone. And I think the UK is a fairly good example. And actually, probably an even better example is Saudi Arabia, in fact. But the UK as well, when essential services start going online, and either exclusively online or made much, much, much easier by doing things online, rather than doing it in a more human way, going to an office or something like that. As essential stuff becomes digitalized, everyone kind of has to use this stuff. They have to use this technology. And so I think it's really important that if everyone needs to use technology, technology should be made by people that represent the people that have to use it.
Yeah.
So I think that in a societal way, it's really important. In an economic way, it's really important because the sector is huge. And we talk about potentially things like AI taking jobs and things like that. Well, AI will create as many jobs as it potentially replaces. And so you need people to be ready for, well, when technology innovates and when technology changes things, how do we position people to be ready to take on those opportunities? What we did here in Saudi, especially, was with the Vision 2030 program that they have, which is the complete wholesale change of an economy.
This
It's
is the
not
thing, like Neom, like the city they're building, and the
Neom's a
opening up of
huge part.
the opening up of the actual kind of culture and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the Vision 2030's got about tourism, it's about technology, it's about lots and lots of different things. Neom is kind of like a real vision, kind of like, or
Yeah.
a real envision
Will
of
you live in Neom, Stuart? Will you be there?
I hope
Is that
so.
the
You know
plan?
what I mean? I would love
It
that.
looks
I would love
cool,
that.
doesn't it? Like
It's
it
next
looks like
level.
the place you should be living in, I think, Stuart. You like I
I
think
think I can start calling you Bloxo now. Now
yeah,
you've just said that to me. It's like, right,
yeah.
we know each
In
other. You know what I
2030,
mean?
we're going to do the Leader Series podcast from Neom. There we go.
Live from Neom. Absolutely. You heard it here first, everyone,
Yeah,
right? If you're not
exactly. Yeah,
here,
I'm ready.
you know, as these services are online, you have to have technology, be made by the people that are going to be using it. And I think
Yeah.
that there's nothing more important than that for me. I think it's really important.
So if you've moved through the kind of, into a leadership role, like leading businesses of trainers, in a kind of more
Yeah.
capacity, what are the challenges that you've come across? I mean, you strike me as someone that's come from a background where you like what you do. Maybe so
Yeah.
myself, like I like doing recruitment and now I run a recruitment business. You like doing training, you run a training business, right? So how has that been a challenge for you to kind of lead a business of trainers to be the leader in that?
So before everything changed in 2020 with coronavirus, there was it's almost like a very different set of challenges that we had. And I don't want to, probably not unique, but with the way that we built Code Nation at that time, which was probably more teachers than we had developers.
Yeah.
Making sure that that was a fairly big bet because the developers were expensive, the teachers were expensive, and ultimately we needed to deliver.
Yeah.
So the teachers, if they were leading a class, they need to be technically where they should be. And if the developers were leading the class, they need to be able to teach properly. So finding that balance and harmony in the team and just making sure that there was respect for all sides and all skills, that became seamless, but it wasn't necessarily seamless at the beginning.
It was a trial and error thing.
In a big way. And we got there. And just as we got there, coronavirus hit us. And that was quite a journey for a training business. At Code Nation, I'm proud to say, I think we came up with an amazing, like truly, truly, really, really brilliant way of bridging the world from before to what we had in coronavirus.
Yeah.
We had a very rigorous online system. We doubled up on everything. Just little examples. where you could schedule a Zoom call and a teacher could lead a session for half an hour, then go and say to the students, right, you know, off you go, we'll see you in a couple of hours. We didn't do that. In fact, our teachers, absolute superstars, they worked harder probably in coronavirus than they did before. We had live video cameras for the 8 hours a day, rooms that if students were asked to go and do an activity, they could join a dedicated room where there'd be a teacher sat there, just so it felt like the office, just so they felt surrounded and connected to everything. And as it stayed online, I actually moved to Saudi only a few months after coronavirus hit. So I remember when we started Sparks, literally 5 minutes later, coronavirus hit us. And I remember being on the phone with my business partner at the time. She was in Saudi Arabia. She was referring to the crisis. Now, of course, in the UK, we dealt with things a little differently with coronavirus in that very early days. And I was like,
we went to Cheltenham.
Yeah, this is it. Do you know what I mean? I was having a great time. It was like, the roads aren't as busy. What do you mean crisis? And so we started this training business, which was ultimately going to be delivering training on the ground in Saudi Arabia to people in classrooms. And we couldn't do that. And we couldn't do that for an extremely long time, in fact.
So you had to innovate.
In a big way. We had to innovate in a big way. And the whole people-driven business that we were involved with, suddenly people weren't going to be together anymore. And the biggest kind of challenge that I face now is how do we keep people connected, feel like they're really tight and close with each other, and building a culture for me was really important where we want each other to win. How do we do that when we're potentially 3,000 miles apart and different time zones and stuff, which is a challenge for everyone in the world. In training, I think it's got an additional challenge just because it is a people business with a context. So if you're a teacher of music, you're a teacher of technology, you're teaching people, you're inspiring them. If you're a leader of teachers that are leading trainees and students, it's the same problem. So that's the biggest challenge ultimately that we have. You know,
and I guess it's got a commercial aspect as well, right? Because training is very much based on references, very much based on someone saying, yes, they're good, someone enjoying it, so coming back again. You know, it's got to be an enjoyable and beneficial experience, you know. And I've been on many training courses that haven't, you know, and I've been on many training courses that have. So, you know, I guess that's at the forefront of your mind as a business leader, right? How do I make this a really, really great experience?
Yes. And remembering the word experience is critical, because again, knowledge is available. It's available on the internet, you know, skills are available on the internet, but having that tailored for you and in your set of circumstances, that's kind of like the differentiator. We did a training course a few months ago. It was 1 day, which is, you know, relatively rare. Normally they're a little bit longer than that. It was for the NHS, and it was a training course in cybersecurity, with a fairly heavy focus on mobile cybersecurity. And I remember we did a day with one group and then a day with another, because they couldn't free up everyone for one.
And this was remote?
This was remote. Yeah, this was remote. So I did one of the days myself, which was great.
Obviously.
And another one was done by, absolutely, you know what I mean? I meant it was great for me. However, now you mentioned it, Loxo, you know, it was a good one. And the day before, the other day was dealt with one of our trainers. And it's quite rare that we would run the same course with two trainers back to back in that way. And so we were able, one, to test consistency, which was nice to see. But what I loved, a few days after the training was finished, we were sending out the aftercare pack that we do, access to the virtual learning environment and things. And the manager of the team said that universally they kind of felt it was good, which was a start. But he specifically commented that they are quite skeptical about 1 day training courses. So funnily, because it was actually going to be a 3-day course, then budget.
NHS can afford 1 day type thing.
This is it, right? They only did the one. And
it's
so
good to know they're putting a lot of effort into our mobile cybersecurity NHS.
Absolutely. You remember track and trace, you know?
Fantastic.
Roaring success. But it was interesting because he specifically said skeptical about a 1 day training course. And that was a good moment for me just to think, because the experience should be amazing, whether it's an hour or it's 10 days or 10 months, whatever. What are people going to come out with? Does the course do what it needs to do? And the best way to make sure that that's the case is to get to know them before the course begins. Find out exactly what they need, and then
exactly. And I think because each team, each department, each person has very, you know, and you talked earlier before, I do quite a lot of training within the business, like, you know, quite enjoy when we bring someone new into the business, like training them, and I totally agree. It's very difficult to train people without having an understanding of them, because like
Yeah,
you know what's going to hit them. Like I'm going to say this and you're going to like this, and that I'm going to say it in a different way to you. And it's something, I mean, I think recruiters are very good at it. You know, we call it communication with purpose. Is like they know how to move a conversation around according to the likes, the background, the different
yes,
types of rapport you can have with people. I was interested in what you said about developers and teachers. You know, obviously, I would have thought that you'd have had the developers being the teachers, right?
yeah.
But it seems no. You know, you have like technologists, and then you have people presenting. You don't feel that there's a very small amount of people, I guess, that could be both. You know, is
Absolutely.
that something that you're quite passionate about?
Exceptionally passionate about. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think the role of, I mean, you can have the role of a teacher. So the role of a
yeah,
teacher is as it is, but then kind of like a few steps above, we would say, and then there's the role of a great teacher. So what does a
yeah,
great teacher do? And that
yeah,
can
yeah.
be the same for any profession. And I think if we look at a great teacher can
Mm,
inspire, can motivate, can hopefully explain a difficult concept
yeah,
maybe 3 different ways in 3 minutes for different kind
yeah.
of
It's
learning
it's funny
styles.
because I bet everyone listening to this podcast now can fit. Mine's Mr. Wood, right? He's taught me
Okay, yeah.
maths in my O level in Barcelona. I lived in Barcelona when I was young, and he was an amazing teacher, and he made maths fun, and I got an A. And I
Very
remember he
well.
was amazing, right? He was an amazing teacher. And I bet everyone listening to now, like you've mentioned a few people, right?
Yeah.
I know that he was a good that or she was a good teacher.
That kind of emotion, or that emotion that you've got for
Yeah,
Mr. Wood, for me, for Shafiq,
yeah,
it's what I want people to have. And even though it's different, we're all at different stages of life at this point, right? But I want people to feel that when they come through an innovation hub course or a Sparks course, whether they be
yeah,
grassroots juniors or whether it be
yeah,
the specialist engineers, just that was a worthwhile experience. I know
yeah.
how I'm going to use that. I'm going to remember it. That's what we aim for, and the how people learn, not just what, is extremely important.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, for me is obviously an important subject. We get DEI training, and it's like, well, it's really good, but it's rubbish. That wasn't very good. And
And
it's
this is the thing.
yeah,
This is the thing. Training, right? It's often felt as something which, okay, we have to do that.
yeah,
So DEI, for
yeah,
example,
tick a box type thing. Yeah,
Exactly. And when you
mm,
kind of like blow it up and moving out here,
mm,
especially, and kind of like zoom in on the importance of DEI, Saudi, and in this part of the world, so in the region, so the
mm,
UAE, there's more expatriate workers here than kind of like anywhere else almost,
yeah,
especially about the UAE. And yeah, they occupy different sectors and things like that. But here in a typical technology company, you've got people from all around the world. You've got US, you've got UK, you've got Egyptian, you've got
mm,
Saudis, you've got Jordanians, all working side by side. And DEI as a box ticking exercise, it's kind of, well, that's a shame. But if we look at the experiences that all of these people can bring, and you turn it into something which is meaningful for that team, and
yeah,
that's where it can get a bit heavy, because it's like, well, if you've got a giant company, DEI might look different in each team depending on the makeup
totally,
of
yeah, yeah.
it.
And
Do
it's
it
it's
properly,
it's
and
not a
it'll be cool.
simple thing to fix. So moving forward, for yourself for the year, obviously Innovation Hub is expanding and bringing in
Yeah.
new skills, et cetera, et cetera. What most excites you about the year ahead as a leader?
So the year ahead for the Innovation Hub, I mentioned before, it's one of the most ambitious things that I've been involved with. And I think that the scale of what we're looking to do, because one of the key things the Innovation Hub is kind of like quite pioneering in fact, is a fair word. And it's your guy, John, that kind of
Yeah,
like kicked it off. The training is fabulous, we think. And then the other side of what we do is the accreditations and certifications with RDK, especially. So the RDK professional accreditations, they are kind of like a leading light in the industry about how you can create something that's so targeted that will let people shine and kind of like stand out and show that they're committed to something. And so we talked about what good can look like. And in an international sense, the accreditations, they're accredited by government.
yeah.
So globalized
Off
service that we
qual.
offer.
The off
Off
qual.
qual, yeah. So the
Yeah, so I
UK,
remember this from our
good
conversation.
man. Look at that. Good, good, good.
Yeah,
Something sticks. That's good. We're doing
because
something right.
you train me well, Stuart.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a fiver coming your way, mate.
Yeah,
In a globalized offer that the Innovation Hub has got, what I'm really looking forward to is, yes, the training will continue to help businesses scale and help people access careers in embedded engineering like never before through the RDK Academy. But what the accreditation stuff does, with it being regulated by Ofqual, which is the UK's regulatory body for
yeah,
qualifications, or off-call kind of on the off-call register, they have to be really good. So we have to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, is what we're doing at the peak of what it needs to be, not just because we say it, not just because RDK say it and massive companies that use that technology, but a series of qualified educators that look at this qualification and think, is this suitable for an international audience? Does it do what it needs to do? So I'm really looking forward to the growth
people
there.
fail. It'd be much easier for us if everyone just passed. Happy days.
Absolutely, they do fail.
I was looking at the failure numbers. I was like, wow, there's some really intelligent people that don't pass straight away. So,
absolutely. I was looking at a bad day when we wrote that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm going to make this.
That's right. You've done the hardest test in the whole world.
I'm like, yes, I knew this day would come. This podcast was coming, and I thought, I'll get my moment.
Ask them a couple of easy multiple choice questions, Stuart. Surely that would have been easier. Do you know what I mean?
Well, we'll think about an introduction.
It would not have been off-qual accredited, would it? So
indeed,
all good, all good. Moving forward a little bit, I'm just interested to kind of go back to what you feel. You talked a little bit about kind of remote training, and in terms of the ways that you do it and in person. Would you prefer to have all of your training in person? Would you prefer to, like, here's my classroom, these are all the people, I look in the whites of their eyes. Which would you prefer to do?
I would prefer that we can nail a model where both of them are used, but not arbitrarily use, both of them, what an answer. But what the remote stuff does and the online stuff does is it enables people to connect that otherwise wouldn't. And so as we're in a fairly, a very globalized world now where teams, for training or not, teams are spread across the world. And so with online training, it's a reflection of how people are going to work. So the training methodology that we employ at Innovation Hub and at Sparks is immersion and immersive learning. And we mentioned it before, it's the idea that the training is reflecting a reflection of the role. So no, I wouldn't necessarily prefer that all training is done in person. I think that online has a huge part to play. I think there's been a lot of false dawns about what online training can look like. Ed tech, there's some amazing stuff which happens there, and there's some things which is just a bit noisy and moves away from, ultimately it's about the connection between the trainer and the trainees and students. But when we started Sparks, I'd made a controversial, again, being from the UK, where seconds before coronavirus really took hold, say Cheltenham, right? We didn't really maneuver Sparks to be online quickly. It took us some time. But it'll be over soon. It'll be fine. And in Saudi Arabia, which only had one real lockdown, and it did really well. It kind of like, it came through coronavirus super well, but it came at the expense of restrictions which you didn't really see. So cafes and restaurants were all open, but there was quite a lot of tough restrictions on business, and school stayed shut for a couple of years, incredibly, like a couple of years. And so training needed to be online if it was going to be done. So
you had to do it.
Took us some time to get there, and we were determined that we'd do it a little better.
Challenge breeds innovation. So
indeed,
one of the things that I think, again, interested as a leader of a business, what you feel you've taken from being a trainer and then taken that into being a leader. Like, do you think it helps you that you understand how to teach people, how to put forward points of view, etc., etc.?
I think, so I think it helps me. So I don't think that all business leaders need to have done necessarily the job of all the people that work with them in their company, but it definitely helps me connect with the challenges that the teams face when they're delivering this or they're creating courses and things like that. So for me, it definitely does help. If we're dealing with Sparks, not Innovation Hub, we don't necessarily do super grassroots pre-graduate, but at Sparks we do. Not everyone that we teach really wants to be there, not necessarily. And so when the trainers are struggling with that, it's kind of, we can empathize quite a lot and just offer some guidance. Now, the teachers that we have, no doubt they're all better than me. That's kind of like the thing. We want to recruit and train and enable the very best people, but at least I can offer something which is, in the past, this has worked for me. So it does help me.
I mean, I think that use of, having been in the trenches, this is what I've done. I understand where you come from is important in all industries, isn't it? It's usually why people kind of move forward and run their own businesses within their own industries. So So for yourself, like bringing this to a close now, as a leader within your industry, what are the things that you feel you've learned along the way? I mean, you mentioned people there. That seems to be a big part of what you've learned.
Yeah, I think I'm not the first to say, I wish I was, but I'm not the
Mm,
first to say that, the idea of making your own luck. I think that often you position yourself in such a way that, you position yourself to be lucky and to be
mm,
fortunate. And I think that when you break that statement down, ultimately it comes back to the people that you surround yourself with, the people that you try and work for and work with plays a big part. And maybe at the time, as you're going through this journey, the dots are all there, but to connect them, you can't do it maybe until you can when you're looking back, you can do that, but not when you're in the middle of it. But for me, recognizing the luck that I've had with the people that I've had, and working back from most recent would be John at GCS, without doubt.
mm,
He's been a really big figure in the stuff that we've been doing over these last few years. Then previously it'd be Andy Lord and
yep,
Dave Code Nation and Rachel
mm,
Code Nation. And then before that, Martin. Before that, it was Shafiq and Maksud. And when I go back and connect those dots, it's kind of like, right, all of those things help me get where I am. But equally, recognizing the active part you play in it. The
mm,
reason why, me and Martin were talking about I'll go and do the consultancy stuff instead was because I jumped on iPhone app development. So
mm.
you have to push yourself. You have to be accountable for the journey that you're going to take, but then just, do the right thing
Yeah, I
with the
think
people.
yeah, I think once you've identified those people, right, that you feel
Yeah.
can help you to push yourself forward, you have to really, in a good way, kind of grab
Yeah,
hold of them
absolutely.
and give them something, and they'll give you something. You'll both hopefully
Yeah.
progress forward, And I think obviously you're a good example of that. And I think probably most of the good leaders that I've spoken to on this podcast would be people like that have worked with people to progress themselves forward.
I
So
think, yeah.
Stuart, it's a cold, rainy, wet day in the UK, a September day. It's been the wettest September ever. Just before we go, tell me the temperature in Saudi Arabia at the moment.
Boiling,
Boiling.
boiling. Yeah. In
Ah,
fact,
you're lucky.
what is the actual temperature now?
It's 42 or
Oh,
something. That's,
is it,
yeah,
let's have a look.
I don't
It's
know.
not that much today. It's only 39.
Only
It's only
39.
39.
Well,
Yeah. No,
let that be a learning. When we do part two of this podcast in neon together in aircon and neon, then I'll be looking forward
absolutely.
to seeing some sunshine, my friend. But it's been great to
Can't wait.
speak to you. Thank
And
you
you,
very much for your time today, and good luck with the Innovation Hub over the kind of coming years. Thank you.
can't wait. Thank you, Dave.
Cheers.